to them reading today originally started with the recitation of the principles and purposes of our association and the living tradition which we share. And you have in your order of service this insert that has this information in it. I've chosen to have it written out so you can keep it. And also to save time a little bit, please notice at the bottom the last item under living tradition concerning earth-centered traditions. This was adopted in 1995 by the UUA, which was the year that Reverend Thompson gave this sermon, and at the time he gave it, it hadn't even been adopted. So this is more up to date than what's in our hymnal, because that was published in 1993. So I know that you will want to keep this on your refrigerator or tucked in your pocket at all times. Okay, so now to Reverend Thompson's words. If you cannot hear me, please raise your hand. It's one of the questionable benefits of old age that once I get close enough to the microphone, then I can't see my reading. So if, in case I back off, please let me know, okay? We're proud of our statement of principles and purposes and of the democratic process which produced it. It's an excellent summary of those things commonly held among us at this point in our history, and it possesses a certain degree of literary beauty. But it's important that we remember what it's not. It is not a creed that all UUs are expected to accept and profess unquestioningly. We're free as individuals to criticize the statements contained within it and to propose amendments through our church's elected representatives. In this manner, our principles and purposes constitute a growing, changing, living document. Another thing that it is not is dogma, a set of theological doctrines carved in stone, sealed within the pages of a holy book, or dictated by some ecclesiastical authority. It simply represents the current consensus among our congregations of where we stand as a religious association. Unitarians in this country have always been reluctant to put in writing any list of particular beliefs for fear of treading on the freedom of individual conscience. Our Universalist forebears, on the other hand, were less hesitant to compose professions of faith, but they also felt no obligation to be bound by outdated doctrines and rewrote their statements of belief from time to time. Our present statement of principles and purposes is not meant to endure forever, for ours is a religious movement that embraces change. We're engaged in a continual, ongoing process of evolution, as are all living beings. The beliefs you share 100 years from now may be similar to those we cherish today, but I'm certain that they won't be exactly the same. Different times call for different approaches to religious understanding. Some religions teach that divine revelation ceased almost 2,000 years ago. They say that everything humanity needs to know about truth and goodness is in the Bible, signed, sealed, and delivered. We Unitarian Universalists, however, are unable to accept this position, for it locks the living God of the universe inside the dusty vault of the past. We affirm that revelation is not sealed. We remain as open to new truth, to spiritual transcendence and wonder as were our distant ancestors. But for the present, I'm satisfied with our statement of principles, bearing in mind that it is what it is, a majority report, a snapshot of what most of us are able to agree on at this particular time. It's impossible to say that all UUs accept any particular belief or set of beliefs. We're too stubbornly individualistic to be unanimous about anything. Not only do we tolerate a wide variety of religious belief, we encourage it. So the best we can do is to say that most of us currently accept and support these principles. That's fine, but it certainly means it's difficult to explain to others what we UUs believe and stand for. Whenever someone asks me, what do Unitarians believe, I respond with a question of my own. You want the long answer or the short one? If the reply is the long answer, I pull out a wallet-sized card that lists our principles and purposes and begin to go over them. So now y'all have. I carry a card like this because the list is too long to commit to memory. I'm sure that many of you have had the same experience. I'm a UU minister, and even I can't remember the whole thing. So how do we explain all this to a visitor or to someone with whom we find ourselves engaged in casual conversation? Our 7 principles are too much for most people to absorb all at once, even if we ourselves are able to remember them and convey them with some degree of accuracy. So I've developed 5 brief statements of my own that I consider to be the heart of our approach to religion. I call them 5 fundamentals of Unitarian Universalism. But before I share them with you, I want to explain why I chose to give them this particular title. I did this as a way of contrasting our beliefs with those of fundamentalist Christians, and believe me, the differences are vast. This is not primarily a sermon on fundamentalism, but I do need to say a few things about that kind of religion before we proceed. The heart of Christian fundamentalism is a rejection of all modern knowledge and scientific discoveries which contradict a literal interpretation of the Bible. It emphasizes the sinfulness of human beings rather than their goodness, and the need for personal salvation through repentance and faith in Jesus Christ as the divine Savior of the world. The fundamentalist movement arose at the end of the 19th century and in the early years of the 20th as a reaction against 3 things: Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, the social gospel movement of Walter Rauschenbusch, and the application of modern techniques of literary and historical criticism to the Bible. Darwinism cast doubt on the creation accounts in the book of Genesis. The social gospel taught that human efforts to reform government, business, and education were the only way to establish God's kingdom on earth. And biblical research and criticism cast doubt on the historical accuracy and divine inspiration of the Bible. Conservative Christians struck back against the modernist assault on their faith. At a conference at Niagara Falls in 1895, they drew up a list of 5 cardinal doctrines, the so-called fundamentals of Christianity, which served as a sort of test. Anyone professing allegiance to these doctrines could be classified as a true Christian. All others, of course, were Antichrist. The doctrines agreed upon at the Niagara Falls Conference were widely publicized in a series of pamphlets called simply The Fundamentals. They were: 1. The virgin birth of Jesus Christ. 2. The literal payment or atonement for humanity's sins by his substitutionary death on the cross. 3. The physical resurrection of Jesus from the dead. 4. His future bodily return to earth, the second coming. And 5. The absolute inerrancy of the Scriptures. The last of these, of course, is the most important doctrine of all because it's the foundation for all the rest. Fundamentalists view the Bible as if it were a series of letters dictated directly by God. Each sentence supposedly is a separate proposition of truth, just as infallible and authoritative as God himself. To question the literal truth of the Bible is considered to be a sin, the same as rebellion against God. Of course, some fundamentalist ministers would have their congregations believe that their interpretation of the Bible is also infallible. According to the late Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong, author of Rescuing the Bible from Fundamentalism, a major function of fundamentalist religion is to bolster deeply insecure and fearful people. He adds, those whose religious security is rooted in a literal Bible do not want that security disturbed. They are not happy when facts challenge their biblical understanding or when they are forced to deal with either contradictions or changing insights. The Bible, as they understand it, shares in the permanence and certainty of God. In other words, rather than truly trusting in God by opening their hearts and minds to a direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder, fundamentalists fearfully worship an idol instead, the Bible itself. There's even a word for this. It's called bibliolatry. Scholars know that all so-called sacred books were written by human beings. God does not send us all truth ready-made and wrapped up in a single package. To a large extent, the Bible uses symbolic language. Much of it is not factual and was never intended to be interpreted literally. We should accept it for what it is, for what its authors intended it to be, a record for future generations of their religious struggles, of their attempts to find God, and of the revelations they believed they had received. It certainly provides no excuse for us to halt our own spiritual explorations. So now I'd like to offer for your consideration my own fundamentals, 5 fundamentals of Unitarian Universalism. I'm sure you'll appreciate the difference. Rather than reflecting an outlook on life that's fearful and closed, ours is an attitude which is grounded in trust and openness. Trust in the basic goodness of life and our fellow human beings, and openness to the possibilities for growth and transcendence that surround us. We UUs believe that 1, all living things are important. 2, all people deserve to be treated with respect. 3, it's okay for different people to have different beliefs. 4, it's okay to change your beliefs as you learn more about life. And 5, it's good to belong to a group of people who love each other. I'll repeat those statements. Most of us believe that 1, all living things are important. We value life. All people deserve to be treated with respect. We value justice. It's okay for different people to have different beliefs. We value tolerance. It's okay to change your beliefs as you learn more about life. We value freedom. And it's good to belong to a group of people who love each other. We value community. Clearly, these fundamentals don't constitute a theology in the traditional sense. I haven't even mentioned God. That's because we share no common conception of divinity. Some of us are Christians and some are pagans, some are theists and some are atheists. On questions of theology, we've agreed that we don't have to agree. So for me, the heart of Unitarian Universalism does not consist of a particular God concept. I'm on a pilgrimage of discovery, and as I learn more about the wonders of life and the universe, my understanding of divinity is open to change, even radical change. As with most UUs, the journey is more important to me than the ultimate destination. But I wouldn't be in the ministry if I didn't have a deep and abiding faith in the existence of a higher power than myself. However, the fact is that I'm simply unwilling to place restrictions on that power by attempting to fence it in with human concepts and language, as the fundamentalists do. My personal definition of God is everything we can imagine, and then some. Is God a material or a spiritual presence? I say both and more. Is God a personal being or an impersonal force? I say both or more. In my opinion, the deity cannot be put into anybody's box or trapped within the covers of anyone's book. But to return to our Unitarian Universalist fundamentals, I'd like to say a bit more about each one. I give highest priority to the first statement. All living things are important. This echoes Albert Schweitzer's famous phrase, reverence for life. It doesn't mean that I'm absolutely opposed to every kind of killing. The laws of biology dictate that all creatures must feed on other forms of life. However, we should do so respectfully, destroying as few living things as possible in the process, plants as well as animals. The same principle applies to the practice of abortion. Now, here, the topic is very timely, but his reference in this sermon is dated. I agree with President Clinton, who says that abortions should be safe, legal, and rare. There have always been and will always be circumstances in which one form of life must yield to the well-being of another. But the taking of any life should never be done casually or indifferently. The second statement is all people deserve to be treated with respect. Obviously, this precludes racism, sexism, homophobia, and every other form of prejudice and discrimination. This belief lies behind the long Unitarian Universalist tradition of active involvement in causes that promote social justice. The third statement is, it's okay for different people to have different beliefs. This is where we and the fundamentalists really come to a parting of the ways. Theirs is an exclusive religion. They turn away those who cannot accept a narrow and restrictive theology. Our churches, on the other hand, are inclusive. Among us, a wide variety of religious belief is not only tolerated, it's encouraged. The fourth statement is, it's okay to change your beliefs as you learn more about life. No one has a monopoly on truth. All truths are tentative and subject to change in the light of increased knowledge. One of the most exciting things about our church is the frequent exposure to new ideas that takes place here. The fifth statement is, it's good to belong to a group of people who love each other. We human beings are social creatures. Each of us needs the support of a loving, caring community. Even free thinkers and heretics have to have an audience now and then. But as I said earlier, we need not think alike to love alike. When I began to arrange these 5 fundamentals of Unitarian Universalism in order of importance, it occurred to me that they could be quite useful as a general guide for ethical conduct. For example, it's good to belong to a group of people who love each other unless that group denies you the freedom to change your beliefs as you learn more about life. And it's okay to change your beliefs unless one of your new beliefs is that everyone has to agree with you. And it's okay for different people to have different beliefs unless those beliefs lead them to treat other human beings unjustly. And people deserve to be treated with respect unless that would result in the unnecessary extinction of other species or irreparable damage to the Earth's capacity to sustain life. In conclusion, I think you'll agree that there really is a significant difference between the Unitarian Universalist approach to life and religion and that of Christian fundamentalism. Of course, most of us knew this already, but before we start patting ourselves on the back for not being like them, I think there's something we should consider very seriously. If a sincere fundamentalist Christian began attending our church, how would we react? I'm not talking about a disillusioned fundamentalist, you understand, someone looking for a religious alternative. Many of us here this morning have traveled that path. I'm referring to a true believer, someone who's in complete agreement with the doctrines of the virgin birth, the blood atonement of Jesus Christ, the resurrection, the second coming, and the inerrancy of the Bible. Would such a person be welcome in our midst? Before you rush to judgment, let me ask you another question. If our fundamentalist friend were willing to accept and practice our own set of fundamentals, would such a person be welcome here? Think about it for a minute. If this person respected our sense of community and justice, our freedom, tolerance, and reverence for life, would it really matter what he or she believed about the Bible and Jesus Christ? Would we allow this person to speak freely about the truth as he or she understands it? Would we be open-minded enough to listen and to risk being converted to conservative Christianity? This situation may never develop because it would be a real strain for most fundamentalists to practice religious freedom and tolerance. But if such a rare bird did fly into our sanctuary, would we be able to live up to our own ideals? I sincerely hope so. But we should always be vigilant. No matter how sorely tempted, may we never, ever betray our own principles and purposes through intolerance or religious bigotry. Thank you. Great question. I think that last is a great question.